may be seated. As they were going along the road, someone shouted out to Jesus, "I will follow you wherever you go." I arrived home on Thursday night after a 23-hour flight from a week spent in Cape Town in South Africa, a week spent with the Tutu Foundation and General Seminary. As I shared with many of you before leaving for the journey, South Africa figures so prominently in my own decision to follow Jesus into the ordained ministry. And so it was really deeply meaningful to me to be able to return to South Africa after 40 years, 40 long years. It was so interesting to see the things that have changed in that beautiful but tortured land, and some things that are still yet to be changed. But I want to thank you for your prayers for traveling mercies. They worked very well. As I told you a couple of weeks ago, when I was in South Africa 40 years ago, it was a terrible time in the life of that country. I was staying in Johannesburg, and I was invited to a party in one of the black townships because my host, Simeon Nkwane, a suffragan bishop of the Anglican Church in South Africa, Simeon was nervous about our riding in a car together, something white and black people were not permitted to do under apartheid, and also traveling to the black townships, which was something that I couldn't do as a white person without permission from the apartheid government. And so, being nervous, Simeon had me dress up in an old priest's cassock so I could come with him to a party given in his honor at his brother's house in Tekosa. While I was at the party, I was attracted by hilarious laughter coming from a short man wearing a bishop's purple outfit, who looked at my cassock and asked me which church I was serving, which is a reasonable thing to ask. When I started to explain what was going on, he said, "Oh, it's a costume, like Halloween. Where's your pumpkin?" And that is the way I met Bishop Tutu, that short giant of a man. Today, I would like to offer a bit of a reflection on my most recent journey, and also have us think together about where we are individually and collectively in this journey of life that we are on together and individually. Now, on this most recent trip, I joined the Tutu Seminar, a wonderful group of people led by Dr. Michael Battle, who had served as chaplain to Archbishop Tutu in the 90s. And together with this group, we traveled to the Volmut community, a center for justice and reconciliation near the coastal town of Hermanus. We met with people like Dr. John de Gruchy, whose books on the South African church struggle against apartheid I had read in seminary. And while in Hermanus, we spent time with people in the neighborhoods and townships, including the township of Zweglele, home of some beautiful children. And we explored together the beauty of the whole Western Cape region of South Africa. Then going back to Cape Town, which has to be one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Our time was spent at the Tutu Center for Religion and Social Justice at the University of the Western Cape. Also at the Cathedral of St. George, where Archbishop Tutu served for many years and where I worshiped 40 years ago. And then one day we traveled together to the infamous prison at Robben Island, a place where Nelson Mandela and hundreds of other political prisoners were held for years and years. And we spent time at the Leah and Desmond Tutu Foundation, where we were joined by my friend and one of my heroes, former Methodist Bishop Peter Story, himself an icon of the anti-apartheid struggle. Well, throughout this return journey to South Africa, I was constantly made aware of your prayers for travel mercies, prayers for safety, and also prayers that I could be open to the things I would see and the people I would meet. Now, I'd love to find time to share more of my experiences, but for now I'm going to leave off on the travelogue because I want to turn our attention instead to this amazing travelogue provided for us in the Gospel of Luke, as Luke takes us along on this journey of Jesus to Jerusalem. I could talk for a very long time about the journey of Jesus to Jerusalem, especially the way Luke tells us in his gospel. Luke goes on for 10 long chapters following this journey. But for the purpose of this morning, I want to focus on just one short phrase early on in the description of the journey. And it's a phrase maybe you missed as Robert was reading. Luke says that Jesus set his face to go to Jerusalem. Isn't that curious? He set his face. What an interesting way to put it. Well, you and I know what's going to happen to Jesus in Jerusalem because we read to the rest of the story at some point or other. And we know that this journey is going to end on a cross. And I think maybe Jesus knows that too. But it's the way he needs to go, to be true to his life's work of love and justice and peace and compassion and reconciliation. And so he sets his face. Now, you might get the impression that having set his face, he'd get to Jerusalem fairly quickly, but you would be wrong. Especially because we read about some encounters Jesus has with people who want to follow him but aren't quite ready, and he gets a little impatient with them, doesn't he? You'd think he'd be in a rush, but he's not. He takes his time. How much time? It's hard to say, but a trip that might take a week at most to go from the Galilee down to Jerusalem seems to take Jesus months and months and months. How come? Well, it's because, as the kids were teaching us early in the service, Jesus is busy scattering seeds. He's scattering the seeds of love and justice. He's trying to plant a little peace and compassion, a little reconciliation along the way, and that takes time. But he's doing that because that's who he is. That's why he's here. I'm thinking about all that as I get ready, and as we all get ready to set our faces to move into the fall. Not really sure what fall is going to look like, not really sure what fall is going to be like. Will more and more of us be able to return to in-person worship in this glorious space? More importantly, will coffee hour ever return? How about potluck gatherings next door in the parsonage, or retreats out at Quinnipiac, or how about the dozens of other ways of getting together that have helped us forge us into a community of caring about each other, and also caring about other travelers on their own journeys of life? Most importantly, can we set our faces as individuals and as a community of the people of God? Can we set our faces to the work of Jesus? Can we set our faces to the work of love and justice, to the task of peace and compassion and reconciliation? Can we find ways to make all of that real and tangible, make it matter to people? Last week, I was so proud to watch from a distance. How far a distance, you might ask? Just checking to make sure you were still with me. Well, I looked it up. from a distance of 7,799 miles. I was so proud to watch from a distance as all of you worked together to provide welcome and hospitality and shelter to some of the asylum seekers and refugees who were arriving here on buses from the Texas border, being used as pawns of a cynical governor. These people, these precious children of God who fled danger in their home countries, only to find rejection on their arrival in this, the land of immigrants. God forgive us. But you all provided welcome. You provided hospitality, and I'm so honored to be associated with you and part of the body of Christ with you, responding to hate with love. Now, Jesus, you might have noticed, Jesus has his own encounters with rejection and hate as he begins his journey to Jerusalem, doesn't he? First, we have that incident at the Samaritan village where his impending arrival is rejected because his face is set toward Jerusalem and not the Samaritan holy site of Mount Gerizim. His disciples are a little bit put off by this, and they offer generously to command fire to come down from heaven and consume the Samaritans and their whole village. Maybe a tall order from people who barely knew how to pray, right? But that's the impulse. And Jesus, it's like he doesn't even know where to start with these people, right? These feckless followers of his. He's like, you've been walking with me and working with me, and you so don't get it. I don't think it's a coincidence then that, what's the first parable that Jesus tells along the way as he moves into this 10-chapter journey to Jerusalem? Anybody want to guess? The parable of the Good Samaritan. You figured it out. There is an incident that happened to Bishop Tutu and my friend Simeon Nkwani. And it happened a few years after my first trip to South Africa, and I've been thinking about it in light of the Samaritan village fire incident. It's a well-known incident that occurred during one of the most difficult and violent periods in the struggle against the racist regime, this system of apartheid. Bishop Tutu and Bishop Simeon were traveling together, leaving a political funeral, when an angry crowd grabbed a person who was suspected of being an informant, working for the white police. And the crowd was about to punish this person by burning him alive. But Tutu and Simeon jumped into the middle of the crowd and protected the suspected collaborator with their own bodies and sent him off to safety, as Tutu told the crowd that they would need to kill him first if they wanted to kill this informant. It was a controversial incident, and he did that recognizing the legitimate anger of this young black crowd, fed up with the violence of the apartheid system. But he later explained to people who were still furious at him, and he was saying, I understand when people are angry and hurt and want to take it out on those we think are collaborators, but I abhor all forms of violence. I want to condemn in the strongest possible terms what happened that day. Many of our supporters around the world would say, oh, they do those things. If they do those things, maybe they're not ready for freedom. At the end of the day, we must be able to walk with our heads held high. For Tutu, as for Jesus, the way you walk the journey is as important as knowing the destination. Archbishop Tutu would scoff at my comparing him to Jesus, but he knew who he was following. He knew who it was that he was following, and so do we. And so as we all move into fall with our faces set on love and justice, set on peace and compassion and reconciliation, we need to think about not only how we're going to treat our friends, our fellow travelers, those who agree with us, bless them. We need to consider not only how we're approaching those who are victimized and ostracized by an unjust system, still to this day, But we also need to give some thought to how we're going to approach those who don't think like us, vote like us, who hurt our friends, and who drive us crazy. What are we going to do about them? How are we going to treat them? And I don't have a good answer for that, but I am moved by the words of Archbishop Tutu, words I found engraved at the entrance to the Cape Town Cathedral. If you want peace, you don't talk to your friends, you talk to your enemies. If you want peace, don't talk to your friends, talk to your enemies. Which reminds me one more time that Jesus never said don't have enemies. If we follow his way of love and justice and peace and compassion and reconciliation, we'll have plenty of enemies. Jesus just tells us what to do with those enemies once we have them. He tells us what to do with the enemies once we have them. And so as we set our faces to a future we don't yet know, we don't yet understand, let's remember that we're following someone who's been there before and who calls us to march into that future, a future lit brightly by the light of our loving God. Let's stand and sing together. Si aham the kukanyen kwen kos. We'll sing it slowly. Si aham the kukanyen kwen kos. 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 Si aham ba. Sia hamba, oh, sia hamba, kukanyan kwan kos. Sia hamba, oh, sia hamba, kukanyan kwan kos. What are we doing? We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching